Hello horse racing fans. Sports movies. Each sport has a great movie to go along with it, even ones that aren't even real. Horse racing is no exception, with a few classic movies and a whole lot of garbage. But for every 10 of these types of movies, you'll get one of these. Today we will focus on two very similar horse racing movies, which both try to tell the true story of a racehorse everybody doubts, but through the faith of a group of flawed but likable characters, inspires the world. And they both start with the letter S. Seabiscuit and Secretariat. Except Seabiscuit definitely did it better. But before I start anything, I'd like to tell you a story. The story of what each of these movies means to me. Most of my first experiences in horse racing were at my grandma's house. It was where I saw my first horse race, the 2010 Breeders' Cup Marathon, and my first horse movie, which was Seabiscuit. I watched that movie too many times, usually while burying myself between beanbags because I found that comfortable, helping make Seabiscuit and everyone around him one of the first pieces of horse racing history I was ever fascinated by. Most people my age grew up idolizing Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. For me, it was Red Pollard. Secretariat was also an important movie to me, as it was the first positive memory I had in a movie theater. Before this, any other time I had watched a movie in a theater, it was very overstimulating for me. I hated how dark it was and the noises were way too loud for my sensitive hearing. But Secretariat was the movie I decided to give a chance and face my fears, and I walked away with a smile on my face. And along with Seabiscuit was one of the first movies I have nostalgic memories of watching music videos of on YouTube. These videos definitely haven't aged well, but I love them to death. I do like both of these movies, but one definitely aged better for me than the other, and to show that off, I'm going to talk about a few main factors that I think explain pretty well why Seabiscuit is generally accepted as the better horse racing movie by racing fans, movie critics, and George W. Bush. Both Seabiscuit and Secretariat are character-driven movies. Of course, their equine hero is a big part, but the humans who they touch the lives of are the other side of the coin. When it comes to these human roles, I always found Seabiscuit's group of hard luck heroes a bit better. I can't cover everybody, but I'll go over the big three in Seabiscuit. You got Charles Howard, the millionaire car salesman who loses his son in a car accident, and soon after his marriage, but he finds love and redemption in using his marketing skills to help drive the horse to the top. Tom Smith, a man who knows horses more than people, and has his way of life altered with the development of vehicles and the lesser need for horses. He also must deal with being thrust into the spotlight, something he is not used to.
I can't work like this. He's not a parade animal, he's a racehorse.
And the hot-headed Red Pollard, someone who was abandoned at a young age by his family and who must live his life by fighting, whether it's against other jockeys or in the boxing ring. But finally, he gets a horse who he really understands. But even with this instant connection, his scars physically and mentally cost him races on Seabiscuit. And through horrible luck, he is injured before his big match against War Admiral. But after so much misfortune, he is finally able to right his biggest wrong and win the Santa Anita Handicap. For Secretariat, we got Penny Chinnery, the clear human protagonist who everybody tells to just sell her father's farm and then sell Secretariat while he's economically at his highest value, and not to go with the Triple Crown because his breeding suggests that he can't go the distance. But through her unbreakable spirit and faith in her horse, she comes out on top. Lucian Lauren, a short-tempered and bitter golfer with terrible fashion who has a hard time living with defeat, but also has a harder time quitting the sport of kings. Through Secretariat, he wins the Triple Crown and learns to deal with his past losses, although this is only really mentioned in one very quick scene and a few bits of dialogue. Ron Turcotte, our jockey. We don't know much about him other than that he's a bold rider and that he starts out in crutches because he made a horse's heart literally burst. We also got Miss Ham, who is Penny's secretary and biggest supporter.
Any other questions?
I have one. How much did you spend on that hat?
And the groom, Eddie Sweat, who I really wish we had more screen time of. He's honestly the best character in this movie. When he gets excited talking about Big Red, it is so infectious. He brings the horse to life anytime he talks.
And you're about to see something that you ain't never even seen before. So get ready!
Seabiscuit's characters come off as a bit more layered, and the way their lives change and progress with their horse is a lot more profound and obvious. Even so, Secretariat still has likable characters that can be funny from time to time, but I don't find them as intriguing. For now, all the characters I've brought up at their worst have been a little uninteresting or inaccurate, but mostly harmless, and both movies still are trying to make these people likable. Well, except for Pancho Martin, who I think is a complete misfire. Some of the previous characters weren't exactly like their real-life counterparts, of course. Red Pollard wasn't Spider-Man in real life, but he is still an interesting and enthralling character with a not-so-straightforward path to success. And Lucien Lauren wasn't a silly golfer with an awful fashion taste, he was a quiet fisherman. But Pancho is a poor excuse of a villain. No one who knows anything about horse racing likes this portrayal of a well-respected trainer as a boastful misogynist. And even when you throw out accuracy, no one thinks of Pancho Martin when they think of a classic Disney villain, because he is boring. All of his lines are just about hyping up his horse or putting down Secretariat and his connections. What a well-crafted villain. The real Pancho Martin was described as a slightly short-tempered and tough but never cocky person, and someone with a lot of heart, so for him to be portrayed as a two-dimensional villain, I can't help but find a little bit disrespectful and lazy. It would have been a lot better to have Pancho not be a villain, but still be a large obstacle towards winning the Triple Crown, and have the Triple Crown itself be the main villain, and each side having an underlying level of respect, and a may the best horse win mentality, which was more accurate, more respectful, and way less black and white.
Part of me thought, well, Sham, you've been a gallant horse. If you can do this, I'm all for you.
And would have given the movie more credence to the idea that what Secretariat is doing is something that no mere horse could do. Into the backstretch, non-fiction ironically requires some fiction to work, as oxymoronic as that sounds. It is safe to say no movie can be 100% accurate, but the best executed non-fiction pieces, in my opinion, have their fair bit of loyalty to the original story. If you change the story from its source material too much, you start to question what was the point. I assume that is how any type of non-fiction fan wants a movie about their interest to be, an accurate and well-executed story. Seabiscuit is a more accurate movie than Secretariat, but that doesn't automatically make it better. You can be an accurate movie and be super boring, but it uses the core components of what makes Seabiscuit an inspiring story to drive the film home. The twists and turns that affect its characters and how all these flawed but hardworking people come together. But what is special about Secretariat was that he came during a tumultuous time in America as well. And, being a horse, he didn't really care about all that. He wasn't really worried about if his president was a crook or not. But he did what he did best, which was run. And he ran so well that he did something that had not been done in a quarter of a century. And that was so amazing to people that it was superstitious. Disney's Secretariat is able to highlight some of its stars' best qualities in short bursts, with the amazing score having subtle intricacies, like the sounds of actual horse heartbeats in the music. And the use of Bible verses is brilliantly executed, as it fits the idea that Secretariat was an animal so great, he must have been made by a higher power. But it also does this while stitching the story of his stablemate Riva Ridge, who is obviously not Secretariat. And other elements that could have been great to use, such as the rich history of the Triple Crown, weren't utilized as much as I wish. I think it could have been actually interesting to talk about Riva Ridge, because a year before, the Cheneries had a racehorse who won 2 jewels of the Triple Crown, adding to the list of many horses who won 2, but not 3, of the jewels of the Triple Crown over the last quarter of a century. That could have been some motivation to say, okay, you already had a horse who came close last year, what makes you think this horse is so great? And then of course, Secretariat shows him who's boss. What I think happened was the writers were afraid of the fact that Secretariat was always a great horse, because it could have been very easy to make him look boring. For example, in Making of Ruffian, the behind-the-scenes documentary of the TV movie about Ruffian, they talk about how it was hard to make each race interesting, because of how her races were all so easy and identical.
Ruffian's races are harder to tell because she was so dominating in her performance. How do you make this exciting and sell the essence of speed when she's just so clearly way ahead of everybody else?
So the writers of Secretariat tried to avoid this issue by overcompensating on the parts of Secretariat's life that made him look smaller, more like Seabiscuit. While still having alright accuracy, what it chooses to rewrite for the big screen hurts the movie way more than Seabiscuit's changes. Meanwhile, Seabiscuit didn't have to change nearly as much about its protagonist to make the story work. Horse racing has always had inspiring heroes. Even today, we have Cody's Wish. But Seabiscuit is the ultimate equine hero. His story was handed to Gary Ross on a silver platter, and most importantly, the setting of the movie. The Great Depression is the reason everything in this movie happens. It's what brings these people together and eventually all of America together to pull for this little horse. Laura Hillenbrand, the writer of the Seabiscuit book, put it best when she said,
"He would have been a superstar in any era, but he came along in a time when America was desperate for inspiring heroes. Heroes that looked like America."
And Seabiscuit's career reflects this pretty well, as it isn't so straightforward. He wins races in California, but even his own trainer says this afterward.
What do you mean? He is a great horse.
We don't know that yet.
He's won 6 stakes in a row.
Against who?
Then he has to prove that he's the best in America by defeating War Admiral, and because of that they become not just horses, but ideas that represent the elite and the working man. In the lead up to it, Seabiscuit loses the big race, meant to lure him out, and his jockey gets his leg broken. And even after winning this great race, Seabiscuit gets injured himself. But like a true American hero, no matter how many times he loses, he and the people closest to him always come back, even when life beats them by a nose. At the final furlong, we have the last big thing that separates these two movies, putting Seabiscuit up here and Secretariat over here. The sense of scale these horses have. Seabiscuit changes the lives of the people around him in major ways, giving struggling people the opportunity to show off what they are great at. Charles' incredible marketing skills, Smith's horse sense, and Red's gift of riding horses. While Secretariat doesn't really change anyone, the whole movie is basically just Penny Chenery saying, "Told you so." The character development that Secretariat fuels is much more minor. For the most part, the characters are all who they were at the beginning, just richer. Secretariat's Triple Crown is framed mainly as just saving the farm and defeating Poncho, but they don't focus on the Triple Crown drought itself as much, which I find the biggest missed opportunity. Disney's Secretariat is still a good horse racing movie, but it's not a great one that tells the story of a great racehorse. But Seabiscuit tells the story of how a horse becomes not just a horse. I could go on all day, but there's no better way to summarize once and for all why Seabiscuit is still the best horse racing movie 20 years later than with its ending line.
You know, everybody thinks we found this broken down horse and fixed him. But we didn't. He fixed us. Every one of us. And I guess in a way, we kind of fixed each other too.